Hello and welcome back to RailStuff on YouTube. This is a new series and it promises to be something a little bit challenging. So this series of videos is something that I've been meaning to do for a very long time. I don't know about you, but I see so often people talking about how expensive our hobby has got. And, you know, I get what they mean. It has become more expensive. The price of locos, rolling stock, even your general items that are consumables like your glues or whatever have become a lot more expensive. Reality is that's a fact of life. Things get more expensive over time, and we all know that there was a sudden jump a couple of years ago. We're not going to get into the politics of any of that, don't worry. But we know that things in life have got more expensive. We're all experiencing that. But does it have to be as expensive as we all say it is? I would suggest not. And that's where I started thinking about this series. In fact, the early thought came from a series that Hornby magazine did maybe a couple of years ago now, that was called the £500 layout. Now that was an interesting concept and idea. They wanted to build a proper show spec layout for £500, and it was an interesting series full of interesting people doing interesting things with model railways. But the one thing that not bothered me but just made me think was that £500 is still a considerable amount of money for a lot of people. I couldn't just dip in my pocket and grab £500 to go spend on something that I wanted. So maybe 500 wasn't so much of a challenge. So I got thinking whether we could build something that an enthusiast would enjoy for a lot less money. It's easy to build a layout as such for a small amount of money if you just go buy a second-hand train set off of Facebook Marketplace or something like that. But has it got the playability for an enthusiast? That may be a great way to get a new child into the hobby, for example, test the waters, but isn't going to cut it for an enthusiast. So what we're going to do is an experiment called the £100 layout challenge. So if we're building a layout that's going to be okay for an enthusiast for £100 or less, we need some rules and we need some information on the budget. So let me take you through the rules. The first rule I may reconsider, which is not a great start, is it? But I'll explain why in just a moment. The first rule is it must complete a loop of track. The reason why I'm considering whether that's right or not is, one, because of the space that I've got. I've now got this extra space available to me in my workshop, which I can use to build a layout. There's probably about 8 foot worth of working space there, but only about 1.5 feet in depth. You're not really, unless I go Z gauge or something like that, we're really not going to get a loop of track in there. But of course, gauge is part of the conversation, but we'll come back to that in the future. So maybe an end-to-end shunting puzzle, something like that, could be appropriate as well. We'll have a think. The second rule is it must have at least one set of points. So even if we build a loop, there must be at least one set of points in there to add some playability into the layout, and so it's not just a circle of track. The layout, the £100 layout, must feature at least one locomotive and one wagon or coach. So there needs to be a moving, working locomotive that is pulling something around or up and down this layout. The challenge is to build the whole thing for £100 or less. It's not just about can we put some track on a board for £100 or less. It's about actually can we go from nothing to a working layout for £100 or less. We must be able to run the locomotive for a full loop. That's if we decide to stick with the full loop. If we go to an end-to-end, then it must need to be able to cover all parts of the track. So what that is basically saying is that all of the track must be functional and it must work well. Point number 5 is interesting. We must not have any of the baseboard surface exposed. So what I mean by that is we don't want to see any wood. It's got to be covered, whether that's painted, whether that's grassed, whether that's however, we've got to find a way of making it look scenic as well. Rule number 6 is that there must be at least one building on the layout. I think that's fair to have at least one building. Doesn't need to be a station. Do we need to put a station on there? Not necessarily. Let's have a think about what we can do, make something interesting, but it must have at least one building. Point number 7, it must have at least one tree or bush. And the bush, needs to be a fairly significant bush, so to speak, but we need at least one tree or bush on the layout, but we're going to aim for a bit more than that, don't worry, because this whole thing has got to look okay. It's got to look okay to go on display at an event in December, but that's something else I'll come back to in the future. So let's talk about the budget. There's £100 available to spend. The exclusions to that, and I'm being trying to be fair and balanced here. The exclusions are postage costs, because a lot of these things you could buy from a local model shop if you're lucky enough to have one, or from shows or toy fairs if you go to one, that wouldn't incur any postage. We're going to be buying stuff with postage probably just to speed things up. Another exclusion is baseboard material. A lot of us will have wood lying around that we can purpose for this. I'm planning to do so. We're going to go and have a dig through my wood storage in a bit. But if I have to buy a piece of wood, then that's just because I haven't got enough in my own collection. But we'll see in the future, but that's excluded from the £100 budget. Also excluded is general tools and adhesives. So if somebody is getting started from scratch, then yes, a consideration is that they're going to need to get themselves set up with tools, adhesives, and all the bits and bobs that you need to become a railway modeller. But for most of us that are watching this or featuring in this, like myself, we probably have all of those bits and pieces. The other thing I'm excluding is basic track cleaning material. So whether that's some IPA, whether it's a track rubber, whether it's a bit of Deluxe Materials Track Magic, we'll come to see where we end up in the future, but I'm excluding that as well, just for the purposes of this video. Another important point, because I'm sure some of you are sat there thinking it's not very realistic, you've got trade accounts and things where you can buy stuff cheaper than the rest of us, and you're right, but any items that are used from RailStuff or that are purchased from a supplier of RailStuff must be accounted for at full recommended retail price and not discounted. So I cannot buy stuff at trade price and account for that in the budget. I have to account for it against the budget at full RRP. Right, it's the basic rules. Now let's have a think about what we're going to do. So one of the early considerations in this is obviously scale and gauge. I need something that's small enough to make something workable in this kind of space, but big enough for my fat fingers to cope with. And that could be a problem. But look, for those of you that are maybe not as well versed in the kind of conversation that we're having, this is the kind of difference that we're talking about. At the bottom, you have a standard Hornby 00 gauge bit of track. On top, the standard Pico N gauge piece of track. The width, the gauge of these two tracks, very, very different. And it makes a huge difference to what you can squeeze onto a layout. Many of you watching will already know this, but some people might not. And we have to remember to cover the basics here. But that is a very early consideration to make. Now, I'm already discounting smaller gauges, like Z, for example, because my expectation is that because there's less of it around, it may be more expensive to source and find the stuff that I want, and therefore maybe more difficult to stick within the £100 budget. I'm also discounting TT120 because it's a relatively new scale, and therefore the second-hand market isn't as strong as it is in 00 and N. Obviously, I'm discounting anything bigger, so it's really a choice between 00 and N. The advantage of 00 is that, one, it's a bit easier for my fat fingers. Also, it's the most popular gauge in the UK, so it's therefore pretty easy to come by second-hand items. It's more likely that non-railway enthusiasts are getting rid of some at Facebook Marketplace or boot sales or something like that, and therefore there may be bargain opportunities there. But a big part of me is leaning towards N gauge. One, because I want to experiment in building N gauge. I've never done it, and I want to. I like it. I like how it looks. Some things can be a little cheaper. My biggest concern with N gauge is about how much I would end up spending on the locomotive to work on this layout. They're my two biggest considerations, and in a minute we'll start to look at why that's such an important consideration. There is something else for us to consider as well, and that is power. I'm going to need a controller as well. I don't have a working layout at this moment in time. I've got a couple of old controllers lying around to make this thing work, but I need a controller, and I'm not just going to repurpose one of those because it's not part of the rules of the challenge. So I need a controller, I need power. So part of me is leaning towards, do I buy a cheap set and then upgrade things from there? But then I've got to find a cheap set that has everything in it that's working, but it might be a quick and easy way to get loco, rolling stock, track, points, controller, leaving me more budget to play around with other stuff. Alternatively, I do have something that I've been meaning to play around with for a long time. This is a box in some bubble wrap, and inside that, because that's particularly not useful, is Smooth Flow Model 1 PWM controller kit. This was bought off of eBay, and I need to find out how much I paid for it, because that will be an important piece. But this is a kit to build your own model railway controller. This is the Smooth Flow PWM Model 1. Let's have a look at what's in here, because this may be a cheap way to get some decent control over our layout without breaking the bank. So we've got some printed dials, blank for your own use, okay. And then we have this box here, which is the box that would then be used to house the controller. And now, of course, typically I'm going to need a screwdriver. And inside are all the bits, from power supply to wires to switches and dials, knobs, PCBs, everything that you need to build this controller from scratch. And the reason I bought this was I was quite curious about what it was and how well it would work. There's some fairly detailed instructions in there, including some pictures. I don't think there's any soldering that's needed on it, which is always good, because then there's less things for me to screw up. But it's I think this was about £25, which may be a consideration, but that's a quarter of our budget on power, and that's a big question mark. Where this video is going to go today is probably in one main direction, which will be Facebook Marketplace and eBay, and doing some research into what can we get for our money. What is going to be our best option? Is it going to be buying a set with most of the things that I need and then improving that, or is it going to be buying things separately and putting that together like that? Another question mark for me is, can I afford in this budget brand new track? Because that is going to be hugely beneficial to the running of this layout. Because here's the thing, this is going to go on display. If you haven't seen the announcement from us already, then let me tell you now that on Saturday the 6th of December, in New Toxeter in Staffordshire, there is going to be a RailStuff open day. We're going to have a bunch of RailStuff friends coming along, and all of those will be announced one by one over the coming weeks. But we've got a really exciting lineup of friends coming along. I'll be trading there, and you'll have the opportunity to see my full range in a lot more space and time and comfort than you normally would. A lot more time to ask questions and to really dive into exactly what RailStuff offers. But also there's going to be some dioramas and layouts on display as well. It's not like a Model Railway show, it is an open day, but one of the things that will be on display will be the completed and working £100 layout. And the premise is, and I think I'm adding this to the rules, is that layout must be able to sit there running by itself whilst I'm off doing my own thing, which probably then leans us back towards the idea of a loop of track. And to do that, it probably pushes us more in the direction of N-gauge. So let's start to look at whether we can find an Engage option to get us started within the budget. To the computer. So rather than doing my normal thing of just ploughing ahead like an excited child and searching for stuff to buy, I thought I should probably just step back a little bit and have a think. So I've opened a spreadsheet. I think I need to work out where my budget's going. So there are things that I need. Track, see if I can spell it right. Loco, rolling stock, power, controller, building, tree/bush. That's it, really. Track, I reckon we can get a full loop of track for less than 15. A loco, we're probably gonna need 40 for that. Let's say we can get something for 10 there. Power and controller, so we've got our existing one for about 25, but which only leaves 5 there and 5 there. I mean, that's doable. But again, what we've got there is track, loco, rolling stock, and power and controller for £90. So if we can get a bundle for £70, then that's going to give us a lot more room to play with to make things more exciting. That's still got to be the target, is find a set for £70. And then I think we're on to a winner. At this point I hit eBay and started the general search for train sets, Engage sets, even looking at 00 stuff that really didn't fit with what I was after. I also got distracted by a couple of other bits here and there, but the search was pretty fruitless. There were sets, but they were expensive. There were 00 gauge sets that were a lot cheaper, but again, that was going to be a challenge with the space that I had. But I kept searching, kept digging, kept looking at options, before eventually I had to hit Facebook Marketplace, somewhere that nobody should go looking for train stuff. Okay, it's time for a reality check. Either I'm looking at the wrong time, in the wrong place, or for the wrong things, or Engage isn't the right way to go because there aren't so many old sets knocking around, or am I just a lunatic for even trying this because it's not possible? I'm convinced that it is possible, but it will be difficult. I'm open to your input. Use the comments section below to let me know what you think I should do next, or whether you think this is even possible. This should be possible. This must be possible. But I guess this is why it's called the £100 Layout Challenge. Join me next time when I take up some of your advice. Maybe head out to some charity shops or toy fairs, or dare I say it, boot sales. Or maybe in the next video I'll change tack completely. Or I will have found something magically. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.